Hello everybody. Welcome back to our channel, the Mark and Pat Power Hour Real Estate Channel. We are here to help you to get through this book here, this California Real Estate Principles book here. We've been doing this for a while. This is probably, I think, our 9th or 10th video here. So we're going through 5 chapters a day, giving you information, giving you Pat's expertise. He's been in the real estate industry for 32 plus years. And he's just one of those guys who has an amazing amount of experience and knowledge. So he's a great guy to talk to about this. So what we do is we typically go through each chapter, and I kind of parse out maybe 3 or 4 different questions from the chapter. Pat gives us his practical experience and any kind of stories that he can relate to kind of give us even more understanding on what these things are about. So welcome back, everybody, and then welcome back, Pat. Pat, how are you doing, sir? How's everything going?
Thank you for the welcome back. I'm glad to be back. I'm doing well this week. Fall has hit Southern California. It's been cooler walking the dog in the morning and at night. Happy about that. Glad that the heat is over and fall is here. So hopefully we'll get some rain. It's been a good week. Real estate, a lot of irons in the fire, not a lot of stuff closing, but a lot of energy moving in the right direction. That's the world of real estate. It's kind of a chicken and feathers world. You can be closing deals, or you can be putting irons in fire and talking to this person, talking to that person, moving things around. And then all of a sudden, boom, 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 multiple deals hit. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. It's kind of a little in between time for me. Listed 20 acres down in Temecula in wine country. Got some price adjustments on listings and moving a reload buyer down from San Francisco. So I got a lot of things moving. And since we last spoke, so that's about it.
All right, well, that sounds good. Sounds like kind of like you were saying, the chicken and feathers part, right? Sometimes you're eating chicken, sometimes you're like pulling feathers. I haven't done before, but I want to do this because I want this to be a place where people can reach you. So do you want to go ahead and at this point in time give out your your contact information so anybody watching can call you if they have anything they want to have, or they have any more specific questions about real estate or maybe a transaction you can help along with? Do you want to do
Oh
that?
yeah. And people can call me, contact me anytime, even if it's for a second opinion, just to say, hey, Patrick, I'm working with someone right now, but what do you think about this? What do you see? And that's part of the reason why we do this, right? I mean, I can tell you, hey, Mark, what are you seeing? What do you think about that question? Here's how it works in the real world, or here's how it's worked for me. So I'm happy when people call me about, I tell people this all the time. I'm happy to do that. So people can, they can research me on Facebook on Nationwide Realty. They can find me at AussieCFO@Cox.net. My email, that's AUSSIECFO@Cox.net. Or they can call me, 949-463-7639. But just do a little Google search. They'll always find me just by my name, Patrick Hourigan, which looks like Ourigan, Hourigan. But yeah, multiple ways to find me. And thanks for that. But I'm always happy to assist people however I can.
Yeah, sounds great. All right, well, let's dive in here. Okay, so we're on chapter 38 now, everybody. So we're going to do chapter 38 through 42 today. So this chapter 38 is called Common Boundary Structures. So the first question is, what is a common boundary improvement?
A common boundary improvement. Yeah. So a common boundary improvement, it acts upon the boundaries, right? The demarcation of the boundaries. So a common boundary improvement, the most common one would be a wall.
Okay.
You put up a wall on a common boundary, that would be a common boundary improvement. Could be a ditch, a ditch between 2 properties.
Mm-hmm.
Could be trees, right? A trees between, but that's what somebody that put that in place to set a demarcation line between 2 parcels of land.
So the demarcation is the marking of the boundary, right?
Correct. Would be the fence, would be the wall, would be the ditch, would be the tree, whatever it would be. That's what a common boundary improvement would be.
You know what? It's funny. I think next time a girl tries to get close to me that I'm not really feeling, I think I'm going to say, this is my common boundary improvement here.
Yes.
So you just don't try to push up against that too much.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Yeah. When you think about that, they use that word I read a lot of performance books, right? I'm a little bit obsessed with performance and moving and taking action on things. And I've read so many books about this, and they refer to something called a boundary condition. You know, in self-improvement books, they'll say, okay, you must set a boundary condition, right? And so if you hit that boundary, shit's gonna happen. Or if or if you cannot go beyond that boundary, man, because that's the boundary condition. You get beyond that, and I can't protect you. So boundaries, are very important in so many different ways, right? I mean, a boundary improvement, it's like a fence, a wall, right? You're setting the boundary condition. But I thought about that when you asked that question, a boundary condition, it's like, it gets me into this, okay, what's my boundary condition today about setting a goal? It's a similar thing.
Right. All right, moving on here. Let's see what we got. The next thing is, I kind of talked about this already. What is a party wall?
Party wall, yeah, it's similar. When you put up a boundary condition like a wall, for example, it's also referred to, what you just talked about, as a common wall, right?
Okay.
Now, common walls are interesting because typically when you put up a common wall, right, or a party wall, as you referred to it, between two parties, right? That wall, let's say it's 6 inches wide, the wall, because it's a slump stone wall. Well, they'll put that wall right in the middle of that boundary, right? So 3 inches of it would be on your side, 3 inches of it would be on his side. Okay. So that wall is owned by mutual agreement because it's on the boundary of both lots, half on his side, half on your side. So, and that also sets a boundary condition that we just talked about, that if that wall falls down, he's going to pay 50% of it to fix it, and you've got to pay 50% of it to fix it.
Okay.
So there's a real world experience that we're always talking about right there. Because in my business, like, I sell a lot of houses, and it'll be in communities where they have a wood boundary wall or a wood party wall between two houses, right? And the wood will be rotted on the bottom and all, whatever, right? And the inspectors will call it out, and they'll say, okay, the wood is rotted and this and that. And it'll come up in the inspection report. How much to fix the wall? Well, it could be $300, could be 500, could be 1,000. So it becomes a negotiating point, but it comes up on real estate deals. So you might think, well, who cares about a party wall? But in an inspection, if the wall is wood, keep in mind, wood and water and soil, they don't get along. Yeah. So it's going to be rotting. So you just got to be aware of it.
Okay. All right, cool. Okay, next question. Can you describe what common boundary trees are? Common boundary tree.
Yeah. Well, boundary trees are interesting because, you're thinking of a boundary, right? Creating a space, but a boundary tree is a little bit different. They're typically on the property boundary, the line, but the roots and the branches could extend beyond your own lot into the other lot, right? That's what a boundary tree would be, right? They're a little different than, say, a border tree. A border tree would be right on the border, but on your lot, and wouldn't be encroaching over or extending over to the other lot. But a boundary tree can create a little bit of contention in that the roots could go to the other lot, the branches could go over there, whatever it is. But that's what a boundary tree would be. They're a little bit different than, say, a border tree compared to a boundary tree. They sound similar, but there is a difference, right?
Yeah, that makes sense now. All right, cool. Just how common people have, they fall into contention about that with a neighbor, where the tree is hanging over and they're like, his stuff is like falling, your leaves are falling in my yard. We got to deal with this. I don't want to have to be cleaning my yard every doggone week because your tree is doing this. I mean, are those common things that happen? I mean, I'm trying to think if that's ever happened in any places that I've lived at. I don't really recall anything like that.
Let me give you, I'd rather give you a quick truth than a slow lie. Okay. Yes, happens every day, every week. I just had this conversation with a client of mine, standing in a condominium down in Huntington Beach, maybe 3-4 days ago. We were weighing the pros and cons on a property, right? And this property had one less than issue about it. It didn't really have a defined dining room. they had a table in the kitchen. The property was 99% perfect, over improved, beautifully improved, back to a nice lake. Everything was right for my client. But she has this thing about having family over, being around a table. So this kitchen table was going to be a little bit small if they're entertaining, right? Now, the boundary condition here is this. I said to her, look, I've been in business a long time. And when I used to negotiate property management deals, I'd get into these fights with people about trees all the time, right? On the boundary, over encroaching on the other, property line, right? And I would always go out and I would say to these guys, how important are these trees to you guys? I mean, how often in 100% of your day are these trees impacting you, right? And I could usually negotiate the deal a lot better if they said, well, yeah, you're right, Patrick. It's just, when the leaves drop or once I think about looking at them or something, right? And that's what I told her. I said, well, 99% of this house is perfect. We got a 1% issue here. How important is that going to be to you? And I said, look, this is how I found out, through my real estate life, trees, how impactful they were to neighbors between each other when we'd get into these contentious fights. A fence, when a fence was falling down, how important was it to two people? You got to figure out that highest priority and highest and best use for you, how this is going to work, right? And we finally got to a point where we talked about it more, where she just decided that this was a boundary issue for her. She couldn't go beyond.
Wow.
Deal killing issue. House is 99% right. We got to find something where that issue must be solved, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I just said to her, let's look at this. Let's talk this through right now. So we talked it through and I said, look, based on what you're telling me, your father's getting older. He's going to want to be inside, not out on the balcony by the beautiful water. He's going to be in here. He gets cold a lot. This is a really big deal for you. Even though it's happening 1, 2, 3 times a year, maybe, and we're talking about maybe 6 days max, maybe a week, if he stays with you. But for you, that's a deal killing issue. Next, let's go on and find a better property.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm glad I asked that question because that's a good story. Yeah. Well, it makes sense. I mean, if they've got their feeling about something like that, then they do, and you got to honor.
They do, man. And it's like, and I tell people this all the time. I said, look, this is not just inherent to this property and this price point. I have a hedge fund guy and a partner in New York coming out to the West Coast, and they're looking up to $15 million. Mm-hmm. I looked at a house that was $12 million with them, and the partner is a culinary chef. He looked at the house and went, Patrick, the kitchen is just so under. And I'm like, I know. We got to find another place in the house to put a second kitchen. He's like, yeah, but the house is $12 million. And I'm like, every house has its limitations, even at $12 million.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It's like there's always some, people are moving targets, man. Houses, they all have some inherent weakness. I walk in and I pick it right away. It's like listening to a really well-told story. It's like, oh, okay, I got this guy. He's solving this problem. He then he solves the problem. He sets the goal and the plan, and then he's the hero, man. It's the same sort of a story, right? And you learn to pick those things out of a good story. Well, real estate is that way. It's the same way. There's always going to be something for somebody that's not quite right. And you got to get there really quick. And the properties that don't work, I refer to them as dating properties, right? If I'm dating and the girl doesn't like me, I'm like, next. And I'll tell my clients, this is a dating property. And they're like, what does that mean? I'm like, well, the house doesn't like us. Next,
Analogy.
So it's like, we got to, finding the next houses are really important as the really great houses, right? We got to get beyond the next houses, right? That's why I have these important conversations with these people to say, okay, look, what's the highest priority here? Okay, we got down to two things that were bad about that house. One was an office. I solved that. And then talking through the process, she solved it a little better than me on the office situation, but we couldn't solve the table thing and the kitchen thing and the entertainment thing. So we just both agreed it's the wrong property. We have to find something better.
Okay. Wow. See, that's why you're a pro, Pat.
Well, it's like, that's, I'm here to offer like these questions that seem so book clinical. Some of the times I'll tell you, Mark, you got to learn this and dump it.
Yeah.
Some of the times I'm going to go, okay, here's the situation here, this boundary thing. Here's how it works, you know? And and like the question you have, how often is the tree thing going to come up? Okay, let me tell you how often it comes up. And then let me nuance that to tell you how a thing that's not a tree comes up and you have to overcome that.
Right, right. No, so much information, man. Like I said, every time I talk to you, I learn so much more. So many details that, I guess as a newbie coming in, if I were looking at these situations, I would be like, what do you mean the tree is going to bother you? Come on, it's not that big a deal. I mean, you're smart enough to know what you've been through. You're like, no, hold on. This is going to be a contention with her. She's not going to budge on this. We need to move on.
Exactly.
Get that date out of the way, send her an Uber back home and let's go on to the next one. So yeah, that makes sense.
Absolutely, man.
I'm going to chapter 39 here. So this one is entitled Encroachments, Crossing the Line. Okay, so what is an encroachment?
Basically, an encroachment is, think about it, and we all kind of know the word, but it refers to a situation where something on your property is violating the neighbor property, right?
Okay.
It could be that tree thing you're talking about, right? I got a tree and I got like 15 branches that are hitting the roof of the house over next to me, and ants are crawling from my tree onto his roof and into his house, or, termites or something. That would be an encroachment, right? Something from my house going over the property line over to his house. Because keep in mind, when you have a property like this, your view goes that way and goes that way, and your property rights go that way, down. Right? But they don't go that way, right? So if I'm going this way, I'm encroaching over onto my property, right? In some way. Could be noise encroachment too. That's why there's CC&Rs, covenant conditions and restrictions, and HOA restrictions on different things, right? But basically the term encroachment just means, somehow you're violating your guy's real estate next to you.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. That makes sense. Okay, this next is interesting because I don't really pronounce this, but it's spelled Laches. A lache, how would you say that? How do you say that?
Yes, I would say it about as well as you said it. A lache. It's a French term. It just means failure to take proper action during a specific time, right? And if you didn't do it, it may prevent you. It's kind of like a statute of limitations. If you didn't do it within that certain period of time, it may prevent you from taking legal action later.
Okay. So that's how it has to do with encroachments then. All right. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, it makes sense. But is that terminology?
I think I've lost that.
Does anybody ever call something a lache, or whatever you say it? Would you ever use that terminology?
Yeah. Hold on. I think can you hear me okay?
Now I can. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Quick truth again. No, never.
So this is a little bit of data dump again, right? Okay, know what this is, but you're never going to use this terminology in your career.
No, it's funny because these things, when you bring them up to me, they snap into my head instantly again because I learned them and blah, blah, blah. But it's like, oh yeah. Or I can be out on a property again and we're talking about encroachments and boundary conditions and things. And it'll just kind of come up nuanced in a conversation and just like, but it'll be like, I just added something to the conversation. It wasn't important, but it was, it's not going to make them buy a house.
I can imagine. I mean, some of these questions, they seem like those kind of things that you would talk to with your real estate friends who kind of know what this means and just joke about it. You would say, oh, yeah, well, yeah. Okay, well, we had lunch at at 5 o'clock, and you were a little lâché today. So,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you violator, you.
all right, all right, okay. I love the laughs. All right, next chapter. So next chapter is called easements, running or personal. Okay, so this is interesting. They've got a bunch of different kind of terminologies for easements. So the
Oh
first,
yeah,
what is an easement in gross?
easement and gross. Yeah, I can tell you a story about this too. Um, an easement and gross is basically a right for somebody over land without having ownership in it, right? If you
Okay,
give someone an easement in gross, you're giving someone a benefit to use your land in some way. A good example of this is like utility companies, a gas company, electric company, or whatever. They have an easement in gross on a lot of properties, right? They'll have at the end of the street on the cul-de-sac, there'll be a major utility issue somewhere placed on someone else's lot. That's an easement in gross, right?
okay. Hold on.
They had the easement. I sold a very specific house. Got me now?
Yeah, yeah, you're good now.
So I sold a house, I think it was last year. It was a very specific house in a neighborhood in Laguna Niguel. It was two lots, right? It's too long of a story. It would take me an hour to tell you this story. But basically here's what happened. There were two lots. My client built a house on this lot and she had the other lot here, right? Well, on the lot on the right, it had an easement in gross. It was a water company easement, which was a storm drain at the end of the cul-de-sac that was running under the full length of that second lot, and it was basically on the boundary between two lots, right? It was just over a little bit, but it was 10 feet wide, and it ran the whole length of the lot, which was like 100 feet, right? And here's the specifics about this easement in gross. What usually comes with these easements in gross are very specific conditions, meaning that with that utility easement that was underneath the land that no one would even know it's there, you couldn't build on top of it. So the second lot, you can't, someone would want basically to build maybe the house right in the middle of both of these lots, right? But they couldn't do it because the easement was right there.
Hmm.
And you can't build on top of it. And there's also, you can't build within 2 feet or 3 feet or 4 feet of each side of it, right? So that takes your 10-foot wide easement to 15 to 20 feet wide. You can't build on top of. The utility company told me, Patrick, yes, we would allow a driveway to be on top of that, but it couldn't be a concrete driveway. It would have to be a removable driveway, right?
Hmm.
Would have to be, decomposite granite or something. And I said, well, how about pavers that could be lifted up? Yeah, that would be fine. But we have to have access to our easement. In the 30 years the easement's there, how many times have you accessed it? Never. I'm like, okay, well, but still they have an easement in gross because the one time they need to access it would be 31 years later, right? So that's how it works. But I managed to get that deal done with a developer client who, as long as he could put a driveway there, he was looking at going, that's fine. I still have another lot over there that I can build a house on, right? And then sell that house, do a formal lot line adjustment or lot split, and then sell off that lot as a separate thing. And I was able to do that deal because of that. But I had to understand what these these gross easements were and look at the line item and all the deed restrictions that came with them.
Right. Wow.
Long story.
Good one though. Good way to explain. Good way to explain the point.
Yeah.
I had a question really quick. When you have that space that's extra for the reason you spoke of, is that called a setback?
Yeah, exactly right. And all lots come with setback restrictions at the front of the lot and at the back of the lot, right?
Uh-huh.
And on the sides too. And it's, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it's called, a setback.
Okay, cool. Good to know. All right, next question. What is a conservation easement?
Yeah, conservation easement, boy, haven't heard that one in like decades. But conservation easement is, well, you kind of have to think about the word. It's if you owned, let's say I owned uh, 200 acres,
Okay.
and I decided, you know what, practically 100 of these acres I'm going to use, but the other 100 acres, I never want to give it up, but I'm going to create a conservation easement. And usually you would create an easement to a utility, put it in a land trust situation, give it to a government agency, to create a conservation easement for those 100 acres or whatever it is. And so you'd say, well, why would you do that? And you'd say, well, okay, so I'm going to give basically this conservation easement to 100 acres and I'll get a tax benefit because of it by giving it, right?
Okay.
And they're usually forever conservation easements. They usually last forever. Once you create one, they usually last forever with that land. And the benefit would be that the owner who gave it, the grantor, the or and the e, he would get to get a tax benefit because of that. But that's kind of how it would work. You would basically give that to a government municipality, put it in trust in a conservation easement for them to manage that land, so it would always be open space, basically.
Okay. No, that's what a great way to put that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that makes sense. All right, good to know. Okay, next question. What is the difference between a servient and dominant tenement?
Yeah. Yeah. Tenement. Yeah. This is interesting. Again, that's like a word that just popped back in from decades ago too. You got to think about both words. The best way to look at a servient is to think of the word serve. If you're serving, I'm serving you, right?
Mhm.
So it would be an easement such as a driveway or something that would serve that person to his benefit, right? So he would be the servient tenement. The dominant tenement would be the land that it's passing over, right? It's dominant to that land, but it's serving someone else, right? Their benefit, right? The
Okay.
dominant and the servient tenement. You'll see it in deed title deed restrictions from time to time.
Mhm.
Rarely, but it just, that's what it means.
Okay. Okay. Do you see that much? Do you see, I mean, these easements that we're talking about, when you're dealing with properties, I mean, how often is that a part of some kind of transaction that you're doing that you have to be, I mean, obviously you have to be knowledgeable of how this works, right? If they're the servient tenement or they're the dominant tenement, you have to understand all that and how that works, right? But how often is that a part of your dealings?
It depends what sort of deals you're doing. I mean, older areas where people have had easements in place and they have rear load alley fed garages, or land. If you're doing a lot of land deals, they happen a lot. But if you're doing, pretty standard cookie cutter tract home stuff, it's never going to happen. Rarely going to happen. You're going to be you're looking at deeds or title reports that have, a gross easement noted, a utility easement, right, from a electric utility, a gas utility, a water utility, like I explained about this thing a minute ago. But that's about it. But um, they will come up a lot on land. I did a deal actually, or older properties. I did a deal in Laguna Beach 7, 8 years ago on a custom house that was built in 1975. Original owner, husband and wife lived there. They died there. The kids tricked the house out to 2013 condition, sold it. My client bought it. And I looked at the deed on that house and it had all kinds of deed restrictions and funky little things on it. Like there was like a peg on the side of the house. And I said, what's that peg on the side of the house for? And they said, well, you see the house next door? If his trees get above the height of the pegs on the side of the house here, you can tell them they have to cut those trees down because it's affecting your view. So these things come up all the time. And that's, I mean, when you get a property profile or a title prelim, you want to read them, man.
Yeah.
When I get like guys like you that I'm mentoring, or other agents that I've mentored over the years, lots of them, and they'd send me questions, and I'd say, well, did you read it? And they'd say, no, I just sent it to you. And I'm like, well, read it and then call me back.
Well, I'm going to make sure not to be one of your mentees that does not read the information I'm asking you about. Hopefully I will have read it 3 or 4
Yeah,
times.
I don't have any problem with someone that doesn't understand something, but at least you've got to read it and understand what it said. Yeah, it said, Patrick, if you look at the northwest corner of the house and impactful of the view looking due north, we can cut the, how do I enforce that, right? I mean, you at least have to have a basic understanding of these things.
Right. All right. All right. Good stuff. All right. Number 4, what does ingress and egress describe?
Yeah. Ingress coming in, egress going out. So
Yeah.
basically, if you had a driveway, you'll see those two terms used together all the time on a title prelim situation. Subject property is subject to ingress and egress by parcel number 2 across parcel number 1, right?
Right.
Meaning, I mean, the one deal I just told you about that had the water easement on it,
Mm-hmm.
right? The place where we could put a separate driveway to go onto the lot number 2 impacted the third lot over, which was an existing house, his driveway. His driveway was actually coming across part of the second lot land. So it was noted in the deed that a driveway could be put in and an easement would be allowed across, an ingress and an egress easement going across that property. So basically it's just the right to use someone else's land to cut across somewhere or to get out of somewhere.
Okay. Makes sense. All right. Next chapter. We got a lot of easement stuff here today. I apologize for this, but I didn't write the book, but I'm getting eased out over here a little bit.
Yeah.
All right. So this next chapter is called Creating an Easement. What is an easement by necessity?
Easement by necessity, the best way to, by necessity, think of the word again, it would come up in a landlocked situation. If you owned a parcel of land in back of someone and the road was out front and you owned the lot behind, and the only way for you to get there would be across your neighbor's yard, that would be an easement by necessity. It would be deemed, yeah, that's a buildable lot back there. Someone can buy it. If this guy in front doesn't want to buy it, someone else can buy it, but he's going to have an easement by necessity across a part of his land, like a gross lease, right? A gross easement across his land. He has the right to it to get across there, right? And that's what it would be, an easement by necessity. The best way to think of it is if someone was landlocked, they would by necessity have to have a way to access the road out front to get off their land.
Okay, so I'm assuming by when you said landlocked, that means property that there's no other way to get to it.
Yeah, exactly right. No other way. I'm trying to think if I've had that situation. I haven't. Nothing just jumps at me right there. But yeah, but a landlocked, someone owns a lot in back of something else, and the only way they could get there, would be cutting across someone's lot to get to that public street or to get out to the main road.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, next question. What is an implied? So what is an implied easement?
It's an easement implied. Again, let's say two owners came to some verbal agreement, not in writing, just an implied. One guy started doing something, the other guy said, okay, yeah, you need to do that. And they just had basically a handshake agreement. It was implied that he could do that while he was living there, right? Now, if he sold the house, doesn't mean the owner who is letting that happen is going to let a new guy do it, because it's just a verbal agreement. It's not in writing and it's not a part of a deed restriction somehow.
Okay.
It's just an implied between the two parties.
Okay. So but that wouldn't pass on to someone buying the house. Like if the guy who was getting the easement, the guy who was the dominant tenement, he couldn't, if he moved and he sold the house, the person coming in as the new owner wouldn't get that same implied easement, right?
No, it's like anything by mutual agreement is by mutual agreement. Each party has to agree to it, right?
Yeah.
And but that's the difference between the naming of all of these different easements, right? Prescriptive easements, implied easements, easement by necessity, gross easement, they're all different and they all have specific meanings for each one. And the implied one is more of just a verbal.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, next one, you just mentioned this. So what is a prescriptive easement?
Prescriptive is unauthorized, in that situation that we talked about of implied.
Hmm.
If some guy has absolutely no authority to do it, right? And then he later claims a prescriptive easement. He goes, well, yes, he didn't give me any authority in writing or verbally, but I was doing it the whole time, right? I had an unauthorized use of this land through a prescriptive easement, and then he could make a claim to get a very specific easement to use that if he had been doing it in a prescriptive way, in an unauthorized way.
Okay, that makes sense. They also add this to it that it's as you said something about how long they've been doing it. They said it's in excess of a 5-year period.
5 year, yeah. So there's a lot of specifics. I've also I've heard this term adverse possession be used with prescriptive easements before. Adverse possession, right? Which it kind of says adverse, it's against, you've taken possession of something in an adverse way, right? Not in an authorized way or a contractually driven way. I've heard it used that way. But yeah, there's all of these terms have specifics that go with them. And, like I've mentioned to you, once you become a fully licensed agent and you become a member of CAR, California Association of Realtors, you'll have access to 12 different attorneys that are on retainer that you'll be able to call with very specific questions if these really technical things come up on any of your deals.
Yeah. Well, Pat, how many times, I mean, take me through an experience with you where one of these things that you hadn't really previously known before came up. Um, because I can imagine if well someone new like myself, if I were coming to this, I might not have all of these things kind of memorized and knowing when something comes at me if it's a problem. And then of course if I'm helping someone to buy a house and they buy a house and all of a sudden I realize, oh gosh, I didn't realize that's what this meant. This is something they should really be made aware of. I mean, how do you contend with those kind of things? I mean, it seems like it's a little bit of a dicey situation because if you're coming in new and you don't know all of this stuff kind of by rote, and then you run into a problem and your client goes, well, hey Mark, this was in the agreement here, and why didn't you talk to me about this, because this is something that's a problem now, because we're looking at this as we talked about this, now we've gone through 3 chapters of easements. That's a lot of an understanding of how they work and what how affecting they can be to the people that are involved. So
Right.
do you have a story like that where you can kind of convey how that how you kind of, I guess, understood or felt, I mean, navigated through those kind of situations?
Right. Well, when I'm in doubt, knowing, it's not so much knowing things, it's knowing when to ask a question, I think, right? It's a whole thing about that we always encourage our children. Look, when you sit in the classroom, if you don't understand something, raise your hand, right? Don't feel self-conscious about it. You should feel self-conscious if you sit there and you act like you know and you don't know. you know so I look, to this day I call these attorneys very regularly. you know you know I'll have agents tell me crazy stuff and I'll say, that doesn't sound right. I just want to bounce this off an attorney and I want to get how they would look at this.
Okay.
But it happens with me a lot. I call that legal hotline multiple times a year, because think about this, right? Anyone can read a book and get licensed in real estate. It doesn't mean they're a real estate expert. I've been in real estate 30 years and I know a lot about real estate. I've forgotten a lot about real estate. Things come up all the time and things are changing. Real estate is like a river during a rainstorm. It's rising, it's turning left, it's right, it's moving. Anybody can get licensed, right? Somebody could call me today on one of my listings that got their real estate license last week. I don't know who I'm dealing with. And if someone says something to me that seems so out of left field, and I'm like, did I forget something? What they told me is real? That could get me into a legal bind. I'm going to call an attorney and just go, hey, listen, I had someone tell me this, this, and this. How's that work?
Okay.
So I'm constantly calling because what's the cost? I have experts available to me, right? I'm standing on the shoulders of champions, man. That's what I'm going to do. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, they've been through court 1,000 times, maybe on that same issue. I want to know how it turned out.
Right. Okay.
'Cause I don't want to go to court. I've been to court once. I didn't like it.
Yeah, I get that from the tone. Well, let me also ask you this then. How good are these lawyers? I mean, from what you're saying, I mean, since you're calling them multiple times a year, um, yeah, just wondering at the quality of the lawyers that we have access to via car.
Well, that's a good question. I don't honestly know. All I know is when when I call them, I'm calling for a very specific reason. I'm not being vague. I'm drilled down to this is what I need to know.
Okay.
What is the California statute on this? How does it pertain? What's going on? Is there a precedent set on this already? Am I looking at this wrong? Can this agent do this? Is there any liability? I'm very, very specific. It's about asking the right questions, right? You don't have to know it. You just have to know the right questions. How does this impact me? How does this impact my client? You have to drill down. So I push them and I'm very specific with them. And at least you've taken it one other level where you can say to your client, I talked to two attorneys. This is what they told me. Happened recently about someone that we have to get out of a lease, right? I had to confirm, listen, in this situation, how does it work if I want to carjack this guy out of here? Do I have to file a 3-day notice before an unlawful detainer? Do I have to go down this? Yes, you do. Do I have capacity to do it? Yes, you do, because he violated these two terms of the lease. Okay, fine. I just need to know the route.
Okay. How often, Pat, in your years of experience, have you run into a situation where you're dealing with the other opposite side of the fence as far as that realtor, and what they've told you is probably not a good thing, and it's not right, or it's not either not legal or not correct, and you've asked a question of the attorneys and you found out you were right and they were wrong? How often does that happen where you're dealing with people who either are immature in the business and don't know what they're talking about, or they're trying to be a little unethical? Does that happen very often with you?
It happens. I don't know if it's, 10% of the time, 20% of the time. I don't know. All I can tell you, it happens. Just be aware of what I just told you, in that, there are a lot of things like this.
Okay.
There are a lot of industries that people can go and take a 40 hour or 40-day class, and all of a sudden they become a licensed fill in the blank, right? That doesn't make them an expert, right? So just because, it's like when people try and tell me different things in this business, I'm very conscious. I want to listen to them and pay close attention. But when they start to get into really specific things that I know are categorically wrong, and because they've sold 5 houses, they consider themselves experts, and I've sold hundreds, who am I going to listen to, them or me? Me.
Right.
I'm considering the source. I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm considering the source. You haven't been there. You haven't seen all these things. You haven't been in court and had to stand in front of a judge and say, this is what happened. This is how it happened. This is why they did this, right? I'm always thinking, no matter what, I'm going to be in court, even though I'm not in court, right? I want a Ferrari, don't want a Ferrari. But, it's like, I know I'm going to be in court, even though I'm never in court.
Right.
But so you always have to think like that, right? It's like they're telling me stuff, but I could be in court, and what they just told me I know is wrong, and I'm going to call them on it and tell them tell them this. So it happens is all I'm saying. Just be aware of it. Keep your ears open. So when things do happen, you go, oop, spider sense just went off. That didn't sound right.
Right. Yeah, be paying attention. I was just thinking about how to contend with that when someone was going to do something and you're like, okay, hold on, buddy. That's not right. And I'll tell you why you're not right. And then, I mean, those must be some interesting kind of situations to be involved in when you have to like talk to someone. I mean, obviously you're probably going to try to take the agent aside and say, listen, maybe you don't know this, but what you just said was not right. And we need to fix it somehow.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I
okay.
usually fix those situations when people tell me stuff like that is like, email that to me. Will you, what you just told me? I'm sorry, I'm between property right now. Would you email me that? Because when I get back, I'm going to get 5 phone calls. I'm going to get 6 text messages between now and the next 30 minutes. And I'm not back in. Email what you just told me, will you? I've caught agents like that many times.
I like that. I like that approach actually, because then it's not you don't have to get in their face in front of their clients or whatever. You can just say, just email that to me later and we'll talk. And then I want to look at that again because I'm pretty busy. And yeah, that makes good sense. Kind of get it out of a personal kind of experience.
Well, not only is it a good idea, but it's also admissible in court when they say they didn't say that to you. And they say, and you've got them in email and you say, well, actually, you not only said it, but you emailed it to me. And here it is here it is in writing, hey, where you said it.
So it's not just saving yourself and it being a graceful, moment or trying to make the moment graceful for somebody. It's also, I got proof, buddy.
I've had that happen on more than a few occasions, even when short sales were going on and I'd have people that were just like emotionally screaming and I had emails saying what they were going to do and this and that and this and that. I never said that. Yeah, actually you did. Let me show you what you did. And let me show the judge what you said. And then also, I've had brokers. I've been in deals with agents where the agents go, I didn't say that. Yes, you did. Here's what you said it. The day you said it, the time you said it. Here's what you said it. And I've had their brokers on the line. How do you want to handle this? We can do it the easy way or the hard way. Here's where he said it. Here's where he is unethical. Here's where he's doing illegal stuff. Pay my client the $5,000 or you're going to lose your license and it's going to cost you a whole lot of more money.
Yeah.
I've had that happen a few times. I've had brokers say to me, hey, Patrick, you want to come and work for me? You're really good at what you do. I'm like, nah, you need me. I don't need you.
Well, that's the advantage of all the experience you have, right? And then the sense of experience and knowledge you got. So that's a good place to be at. Okay, this next question, you already mentioned what landlocked is, but there's another term called tacking.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to ask you what that was.
Thanks. I mean, it's only listed one time here in the book, and I'll read the paragraph that it leads up to it. So it's the 5-year requirement of uninterrupted use continues on the transfer of the benefiting property to a new owner as long as the new owner continues the same unauthorized use of the burdened adjoining property established by the previous owner, called tacking.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, I've never heard of that term in real estate. That was a new one for me.
Okay.
I've not heard it. It's very nuancy, man. And you will not hear it much, but it's, obviously it's real.
Yeah, it just seems to have to do with the term, right? We talked about that earlier with the 5 years with the previous thing we just talked about, right? With the prescriptive easement.
Yes.
Like similar to that, or maybe that's just another way. Maybe tacking and prescriptive easement mean the same thing, is what it seems like. And they're just
Very similar.
different terminology. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Let's go to the next chapter. This chapter is called Termination of Easements. So, can you describe abandonment of an easement?
Abandonment. Yeah. Just basically permanently giving it up or surrendering it, right? Deserting it in some way, right? Your right of way to it. You've deserted it. You've given it up in a permanent way.
Okay.
Best way to look at it would be that way.
Okay. All right. Next question. Can you describe a forfeiture of an easement?
Forfeiture would be, you would have to do something to violate the easement to forfeit it, right? Let's say you had a gross easement across someone's land and then you decided to put, I don't know, pink flamingos all the way down each side of it or something crazy.
Florida, don't get mad at me. I don't want to feel like I'm in Florida here.
Yeah, exactly, man. You would have to do something to violate the terms, right? And if you were in violation of those terms and you kept doing it, you would forfeit your right to that, right? It's a lot of these terms are used in every legal requirement, right?
Yeah,
Crazy parents in a divorce proceeding would forfeit their right to their children if they just were just doing drugs or some crazy stuff. They would, there's certain conditions that are set that you have to adhere to,
right.
right? And same in real estate. If you do these things, you'll get the easement. You'll forfeit your right if you abuse the easement in some way, and that's what forfeiture would be.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so the last question here, what is a merger of an easement?
Yeah, merger of an easement. Best way to look at that is that I can't grant myself an easement on something I already own. So let's say I own property A next to property B. I own A and I've got an easement going across B. I later purchase B. Now I own both properties. There's no reason to have that easement anymore. It's just merged. I own both of them. So there's no reason to give myself an easement for my own property.
Right.
So
Okay.
you just merge it at that point.
All right. Well, Pat, that puts us at the end of these chapters on easements. I think I get the idea that there's a lot of easements that you should understand and know about. And of course, when they come up in a contract or something I'm dealing with, I'll probably just call you up and go, Pat,
Yeah.
easement again. Now, how does this affect this property that I'm about to, try to help this person with?
Well, it's like, what I said a minute ago, they're super important. Easements are super important, man. I mean, it's just, they're incredibly important when you think about it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But it's just something, how often is it going to come up? Not that often. I mean, are you going to, you need to ask the right questions, know when to ask the right questions. So when you get sent a prelim title report and you see on there, it says an easement in gross given to utility company, this, or whatever you see the word easement, it's going to prick up your ears to go, oh, I better read this.
Yeah.
What's this easement all about? What does it mean? How does it impact my seller? How does it impact the buyer?
Yeah, obviously it's important because they spent 5 chapters talking about them, you know. So the stuff you need to know. But yeah, I thought I understood at one point in time very simply, like, oh yeah, this is somebody else's property and you have the right to kind of cross against it. And that's why I kind of thought all it had to do with. But now, prescriptive, implied, all the other ones we just talked about, it's like there's so many different kinds, different types of like easement and gross, and all of this is like, oh, yikes, so many
Yeah.
different things. But yeah, it's an interesting thing to think about this real estate game, and as I'm learning from this perspective and seeing all of this information, it's like, I mean, my previous history is teaching music production and music, performance and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I think I know how my students look at me sometimes when I start talking all of this theoretical talk about these things, and they're like, how am I going to remember all of those myriad of things, because when I get out in the world, and it's just like, I know when my first gig happened and our first, jobs happened like that. It's like, well, you go out there, you figure it out in real time, and you make your mistakes, and then you correct them and do the best you can. That's all you do, and thank goodness you have friends like you, who can help you to understand this better. I mean, I can't tell you, Pat. I mean, I know I said this a lot when we talk about this, but honestly speaking, your insights to this stuff just makes this so much more digestible for me. When I read these books and I look at this information, I go, okay, I get this theory, but then you attach a story to it, you talk about it, we laugh about it, whatever, and all of a sudden it has a whole new life to it. I just go, oh, that makes a lot more sense to me.
Yes.
And I also love the fact when you say, Mark, that's something you'll never have to know again after you get done taking your test. So just know the test, don't know it anymore, because don't,
Yeah.
brain cells to keep that in your head. We got about like 9 minutes here. Any good stories you want to leave us with here today? You always have a great story. I think eventually what we're going to do with this channel is we're going to just do the past story time and just
Yeah.
stories. You know what I
I
mean?
do. I do actually want to tell you the sign back here that says make the decision. One of these calls, we're going to do one of those where I'm going to tell you the story around these seminars that I do for, people with a little more advanced real estate history behind them, or even people that that want to make their first foray into that world. And I tell them a story about just a rock star that I worked for. and some of the things that she imparted on me in that process. I'll do that one day, and that'll be story time. It's a good story. And so that'll be a good thing. But yeah, I mean, the story that I mentioned to you, the easement story, a minute ago about the lot that I sold, that is, like I said, that story would take me literally 30 to 45 minutes from beginning to get-go to the end on that story. You know, the person that I got the deal done with was so happy that I was able to get the deal done for her, that it was so complex. She never thought it would happen. And I knew it'd be complex, right?
Right.
And to the point where, you know, the people around that lot was so happy that the new buyer came in because they felt that the previous owner was just so difficult to get along with. That the transition was a benefit to the neighborhood, and it was going to be good for everybody involved. But learning about these things, it's really important when you go into them, and when these challenges come up that are out of the ordinary, that you embrace them from the right perspective of learning. You know, in that process, I personally went into the city 2 different times myself with the owner to get their opinion on building and driveways and things. I had multiple phone calls with the city. I had phone calls with the city council members, the mayor's office, to get an opinion, to county geologists. It was just this how we talk about this evolving, right? This Zoom call interaction that we're doing, how we don't know where it ultimately will lead, but that's how that deal was. I just kept having to peel the layers of the onion, right?
Right.
So now I've talked to this city person. Now I've talked to this inspector. Now I've talked to a building department. Now I'm engaging City Hall because they'll have to give a variance to make this happen. And what do I think the chances of that will be? Well, if they do that, they'll have another lot which they can tax and make revenue for the city. So that's probably a good chance. So it's just, you know, these deals, they're so complex sometimes.
Yeah.
And they weave all different directions, and you've got to do so much. But that's the best story I have for you this week. That easement story just took me in so many different directions, talking to so many people. And some of those people are still in my database to this day as VIP people to call for a very nuanced situation if something were to happen. And it may not happen for another 5 years, but if it does, I know the right people to contact.
Right. Well, I think it's something that you kind of you hinted at a little earlier when you just said is that this is kind of a journey, and looking at it from the perspective of let me learn from everything and not look at it as a hardship, but look at it as like something more to learn about the business with every single part of the nuance of that deal of what it was. Because I mean, I could see someone who looks at that from a totally different perspective going, I'm so frustrated. This deal has got so many dynamics going on that I don't understand, that I don't know. And I've got to reach out to this person, this person, this person, this person. And, you know, a different personality type might look at that and kind of take it really negative. Like, I've had a horrible day today. I had to do all this stuff. But I like your angle on it, where it's, you know, let's learn. Let me learn from these different things and know about this now. So now I know about those things that I didn't know about before. And if it ever comes up again, like you said, I can call this person. They can help me out to understand this even more so. So yeah, man, you know, I mean, knowing that you can go through the journey and you can face the obstacles and realize there's a value to them. It's not
Yeah.
having a hard time today. It's like I'm learning something today about this. So,
And also to solve those problems, right? Where it's that story that I told you about, the hero's journey, right? You got to look at your clients as the hero, right? They're the hero. Everyone wants to tell the heroes. That's the ultimate story, man, the hero's journey. We all have one.
right,
And it's our job to solve the problems for the hero, which is our client, right? We come in, we're the key person. They have a problem. We have to solve that problem. How do we do it? We take these action steps, right? We implore them to do these things, take these action steps, how we're going to solve their problems and make them a hero. and we're going to sell their house or get that house for them and solve the problem. We want the information, but we also have to get that information and take action with it and solve the problems. It's always about that.
Right, right. Yeah, well, good stuff, man. All right, well, thank you everybody for hanging out and staying with us. I know our videos are long, but you know what? We have a lot. These are chock full of information. So if you hang with us, I know you're going to get value from this. So please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell there and keep up with us. We'll be back next week again and doing the same thing. We've still got a ways to go through this book. We got probably another 40 chapters to go through. So this is that's going to be a while, but
Hey, Mark, just remember, we're long players, man. We're long players. We're in this for the long. We're not flippers, man. We're not quick in and out. We're long guys. We go long, man. Real estate. Keep this in mind about real estate. Real estate is not timing the market. It's time in the market that counts. Time in. That will always save you, man. And you've got to be a long player. Everybody that's made lots and lots of money in real estate are long players, and that's what we are.
Yeah, I appreciate that sentiment, Pat. All right, well, I'm going to wish you a great week today. Go out there and have a blessed week with you and your family and everything like that. Everybody, thank you again for hanging out with us. We'll see you next week, all right?
See you next week. Take care, Mark.
Okay, you too, Pat.